Don't test me, Kirk! I will break you!
Hi guys, welcome back. Even Spock, the rational half-Vulcan, sometimes loses control of his emotions in Star Trek. Spock, while being renowned as the ever-logical half-Vulcan, has lost control of his emotions multiple times over his many appearances in Star Trek. Throughout Star Trek, the original series, it became clear that Spock felt his emotions intensely, despite the fact that he rarely voiced them. He clearly cared for Captain James T. Kirk and Dr. Leonard McCoy, as well as the rest of the crew of the USS Enterprise. Even Spock, who works hard to keep his emotions under control, cannot escape the odd outburst. Vulcans experience their emotions more intensely than humans, but they learned ages ago to repress them in order to prevent relapsing into their destructive ways of the past. Spock was depicted in this manner by Leonard Nimoy as a guy who must keep his emotions firmly reined in order to avoid being overpowered. Spock, played by Ethan Peck in Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, has not yet learned to control his emotions in this manner. He hasn't entirely accepted his Vulcan nature and is still trying to balance it with his more human impulses. Though the Spock of today's Star Trek series is a younger, more emotional version of the character, Spock has never been emotionless. The Naked Time from Star Trek, the original series Naked Time in Star Trek, TOS Spock. While Spock usually does an excellent job of hiding his emotions, extraneous factors can lead him to lose control. In the Star Trek TOS Season 1 episode The Naked Time, the crew of the Enterprise becomes afflicted with a disease that causes them to behave inebriated. Spock laments that he could never tell his mother he loved her and that he was ashamed of his friendship with Kirk as he struggles to withstand the effects of the polywater intoxication. Though Kirk assists in bringing Spock back to his senses, it is evident that Spock is struggling to control his overwhelming emotions. This Side of Paradise from Star Trek, the original series This Side of Paradise. Spock's mental instability is caused by extraterrestrial plant spores in this side of paradise. When the Enterprise arrives on the planet Omicron Ceti 3, they learn that the people living in the Federation colony there are in excellent health despite the planet being bombarded with fatal radiation. Among the colonists is a young woman named Layla Kalomi, who had previously fallen in love with Spock. Layla takes Spock to a flower field, where he is exposed to plant spores that force him to confess his love for Layla and disregard Captain Kirk's instructions. Eventually, Kirk recognizes what has happened and assists Spock in waking up. While it's entertaining to watch Spock so happy and in love, the episode concludes on a sorrowful note as Spock realizes what he's lost. Amok Time from Star Trek, the original series Amok Time in Star Trek, Spock and Kirk. One of Spock's most genuine emotional outbursts occurs in the classic TOS episode Amok Time. When Spock returns to Vulcan for his wedding to T'Pring requests that Spock and Kirk compete in the Vulcan Caliph Fee Challenge. Spock fears he has slain his best buddy during the fight. Dr. McCoy describes the ruse he used to make Kirk appear to be dead when Spock arrives on the Enterprise. Spock's expression of sheer elation when he finds Jim alive demonstrates how much he cares for his buddy. Although Spock had previously experienced heightened emotions as a result of Pon farr, when he sees Kirk, he is not influenced by anything outside of himself. Spock's reply is heartfelt, demonstrating that he has always felt deeply. All Our Yesterdays from Star Trek, the original series All Our Yesterdays, Spock McCoy, Star Trek TOS. Spock and Dr. McCoy attempt to track Captain Kirk down after he enters a temporal warp. While Kirk is sent to 17th century England, Spock and McCoy are transported to the prehistoric past during an ice age. Zarabeth, a young lady, leads Spock and McCoy to a cave for protection. Spock quickly reverts to the strong feelings of ancient Vulcans after being transferred to the past, and he falls in love with Zarabeth. When McCoy criticizes Zarabeth, Spock feels both delight and affection, as well as intense fury. Spock must eventually leave a weeping Zarabeth behind. When he returns to the future, he reverts to his former self. The motion picture Star Trek in the series Star Trek and the feature film Spock, Leonard Nimoy is an actor. Captain Kirk and the Enterprise crew face a strong monster known as V'ger in the first Star Trek film. Spock tries to mind meld with the creature to determine what V'ger wants and discovers that it was an old Earth probe charged with gathering as much information as possible. V'ger now feels purposeless after completing the task. Spock weeps over V'ger in a scene from Star Trek, the motion picture's director's cut, noting, "As I was when I came aboard, so is V'ger now, empty, incomplete, searching. Logic and knowledge are insufficient." Spock seldom cries, and his sad confession here makes him recognize the true value of letting himself feel. Star Trek, The Next Generation. Zachary Quinto as Spock in Star Trek. Spock suffers greater loss in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films than he did in Star Trek, the original series. This Spock not only witnesses the devastation of his home planet Vulcan, but he also sees his mother die after attempting and failing to save her. Though Spock does not cry immediately after his mother's death, the shock and anguish he feels at the time are visible on his face. Later, when James Kirk confronts him about his seeming lack of emotions, Spock loses control, taking his fury and anguish out on Kirk before resigning. Into Darkness, Star Trek Into Darkness, Star Trek Spock. Star Trek Into Darkness, directed by J.J. Abrams introduces Captain Kirk, Spock, and the Enterprise crew to a new incarnation of the notorious Star Trek villain, Khan Noonien Singh. When Khan is found to be responsible for Captain Kirk's murder, Spock pursues him around San Francisco before fighting him in a deadly fistfight. Spock fights Khan with no holds barred, unleashing all of his sadness and wrath. Even his love, Uhura, gets through to Spock just in time before he murders Khan when she explains that Khan's blood can save Kirk. Season 2 of Star Trek, The Discovery of Star Trek's Spock. Such sweet despair Spock, played by Ethan Peck, made his debut in Season 2 of Star Trek, Discovery, and the entire season is an emotional roller coaster for the half-Vulcan. Spock has a mental collapse after mind-melding with the time-traveling Red Angel he had seen in visions. Spock and Michael Burnham journey to Talos IV, where the strong Talosians mend Spock's shattered psyche. Spock continues to struggle with everything he has been through, and he has an emotional parting with Michael when she departs for the far future aboard the US Discovery. All those who wander from Star Trek, Strange New World, Spock is furious. Spock releases a tangible wrath as he pursues the deadly hatchlings after being urged to utilize his rage to combat the cruel Gorn. Spock says earlier in the episode that without proper mindfulness, Vulcan emotion is dangerous, and this is demonstrated when he unleashes his rage. While his outburst aids him in the fight, Spock struggles to control his rage afterwards. Later, during the funeral of Hemmer, Spock walks out into the corridor and strikes the wall in fury. Nurse Chapel consoles him. The Spock of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds clearly has a long way to go before becoming the self-controlled Vulcan shown in TOS. Charades from Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, Star Trek, Spock's charades in the Strange New Worlds Season 2 episode Charades. Spock finds himself momentarily trapped as a human. Several times throughout the episode, Spock allows the new rush of human emotions to get the best of him, with both beneficial and harmful consequences. After Nurse Chapel is feeling overwhelmed, he gives her an encouraging embrace, then tries to attack Sam Kirk after he leaves a mess on the conference table. Spock finds charades to be a therapeutic episode as he defends his mother and eventually gives into his affections for Chapel. The complexities of Spock's emotional issues epitomize Star Trek at its best, and it's no surprise that Spock has become one of the franchise's most iconic and lasting characters. Thanks for watching.